Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. And now, from the Seehafer News Studio, your moderator, Brian Norton.
And good afternoon, and welcome to our third and final in our series of Seehafer News Radio Debates, this election cycle 2020. The first day on Tuesday, we had the two candidates vying for your vote in the 2nd Assembly District, and Republican incumbent Shay Sortwell and challenger Mark Kiley. Yesterday, we heard from the candidates vying for your vote in the 6th Congressional District to represent you for the next 2 years in Washington, D.C. Republican incumbent Glenn Grothman and his challenger Jessica King from Oshkosh, a Democrat. Today, we wrap up our series of Seehafer News debates presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc, as we will hear directly from the two candidates vying for your vote to represent you in the 25th Assembly District for the next 2 years in Madison. Joining us today on our Seehafer News Radio Debates presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc, the incumbent, Republican Representative Paul Tittl of Manitowoc, and his challenger, Democrat Kerry Trask of Manitowoc, and we are doing today's debate via phone. So, gentlemen, Mr. Tittl and Mr. Trask, can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear, Brian.
Paul?
Yes, sir, Brian.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, and again, I thank you for being a part of today's debate, and so do our listeners. Now, things are being run here a little bit different today. They are being run via phone instead of in person. So things may be a little bit different, but I just want to recap the rules that I did go over with both Mr. Tittl and Mr. Trask before we begin today's debate. Each candidate will be given a 90-second opening statement and also a 90-second closing statement. In a discussion before the debate began, we decided who would go first and who would go second. It was decided that Mr. Trask would give his opening statement first, followed by Mr. Tittl, and then Mr. Trask would give his closing statement first, followed by Mr. Tittl, his closing statement. All answers will be limited to 90 seconds. Now, doing this via phone, things could be maybe a little bit rough, but if you hear me, ladies and gentlemen, interrupt from time to time to maybe give a time as we get closer to the end of the 90-second time limit. Please forgive me, but that may be the only way we have to do this to keep this on even keel and rolling through the program. Again, we will not take any phone calls. It's just can't do it. But again, if you do want to partake in the program and to have anything that you would like our two candidates today to debate on, our WOMT Shoreline text line is open. 920-682-4674. That is 920-682-4674, and we will get to those shortly. But now it is time to hear from both candidates, and as I talked just a moment ago, it was determined beforehand that Mr. Trask would give his opening statement first. And Mr. Trask, you have 90 seconds, please. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kerry Trask. I'd like to thank Seehafer Broadcasting, along with Brian Norton and Jeremiah Novak and Paul Tittl, for making this happen. You know, I've lived here for almost 50 years now, raised a family here, and I'm running for the state assembly because after an entire decade of Republican-dominated government, with its big deals for the likes of Foxconn, its big tax cuts for large corporations and the super-rich, along with its union-crushing, health care denying, democratic-destroying policies, it's time, I think, to change the priorities and to once again focus on the common good and the needs of the Wisconsin people. Now, to do that will require a new kind of representation that's not merely a rubber stamp support system for partisan interests. And I really believe that I have the temperament, experience, education, and the work ethic to be an effective, open-minded advocate for the interests of the people of the 25th District. Now, in seeking this office, I'm not seeking a political career. the goal of which would be to get elected and reelected over and over again. And, that's very much a liberating situation.
20 seconds, sir.
Freed of that, I can steer a more independent course beyond any party agenda without giving in to the pull and pressure of special interests, so that the public interest will be the driving force motivating my actions and decisions as your representative.
All right, sir. Thank you for your opening statement. And Mr. Tittl, you have 90 seconds. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Seehafer Broadcasting and Novak Service Center, and all the people that are listening on WOMT and WCUB. I also want to thank the people who have supported me since 2004 when I first got elected to the city council. I served on that from 2004 to 2008. I was on the county board from 2006 to 2013, including 2 years as your county board chairman. I've also worked hard with dignity and never take the support I have received for granted. Since 2013, I have served the people of the 25th District and would like to continue being a watchdog for Wisconsinites who, when I've met out in the community, tell me that the tax burden in our state is still too high. I met a man 8 years ago. I'm going to call him Harlan. Now, Harlan receives about $900 a month in Social Security. His property tax bill is $300 a month for a house that he built 50-plus years ago. 1/3 of his income goes to pay to live in his own house that he paid off years ago. He is one of the reasons why I have pushed my leadership to continue to fund senior care, to help pay for prescription medicines for seniors, and to continue to look at the tax burden for the people of Wisconsin.
15 seconds.
But I also believe that we also need to say thank you to people like Bob Ziegelbauer, who have been delivering services without raising taxes for over 14 years. And this year, Mayor Nichols also delivered a tax break. So to those men, I want to say thank you, and I look forward to the next hour.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. And we are now going to take a look at some questions that have been sent in also by our listeners and also that are being texted in as we speak on our WOMT Shoreline text line. If you would like to be a part of today's debate, 920-682-4674, and you must use the area code to get your question answered on air. I guess, gentlemen, we begin with COVID-19. Question: when are the state legislators and governor going to get their act together as it relates to this response or lack thereof of the COVID-19 pandemic? And Mr. Tittl, we're going to begin with you this time, please. You have 90 seconds.
Okay. Well, thanks for that great question. When the COVID-19 hit, nobody was planning for this at all. It was never anybody saw it in the headlights of what we saw. Now, when we actually did pass legislation to help Wisconsinites. In fact, we accessed over $2 billion in federal funds for health care and small business support. We also passed the bill, the COVID relief package, at $150 million increase in public funding. Also allowed local municipalities to waive fees for late property taxes. We eased some of the restrictions for healthcare workers here in the state. We also expanded telehealth, which I've been working on for some time, expanding telehealth for mental health. But telehealth has actually expanded quite greatly because of this. I mean, if you're going to look at a silver lining on that, people are able to see their doctor and get some services where they normally couldn't get services, and expanding of telehealth. So we don't have the answer for it. I will tell you that, but I will tell you that we have been working very hard to try to ease the burden and helping people with unemployment issues, especially some of these that have been waiting months and months and months, and I continue to help and work on that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. Mr. Trask, you have 90 seconds, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I know action has been taken, but, the fact is the COVID-19 pandemic cannot be properly addressed until it ceases to be a politicized issue. And until, politicians stop deliberately disseminating misinformation. And then, once we get the leader of the Speaker of the Assembly and the majority leader of the Senate to be willing to sit down and talk with the governor. I don't know how we can get down the road, but for everyone's sake, Wisconsin really needs to institute a statewide plan based on solid, actual conditions and the facts of modern medical science. And it can't be a plan of one size fits all because, there's different intensities from region to region in the disease's impact. But it has to contain enforceable policies pertaining to testing, mask wearing, the size limits on public and private gatherings for the protection of everyone
15.
Until a vaccine is ready.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. And this kind of dovetails into what both of you have already said in regards to everyone working together. So on this COVID-19 and any and all issues, the question that this particular listener asks, how and will you work with Governor Evers from now and into the future if elected on any issue? Mr. Trask, we start with you. You have 90 seconds. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Governor Evers certainly has the good of the state and the good of the people at heart and has tried, but has had obstructions cast in his way over and over again, court cases to nullify the actions he's trying to take. I'll be supportive of Evers, of the governor, in every way I can in terms of my public statements and in terms of my actions as a member of the Assembly. Really, what you said, Brian, is what sort of the bottom line is that nothing's going to work until we start to work together on this. And the fact that people are pouting, and trying to chop Evers down at every turn is just absolutely not in the interests of the general good or the people of the state.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trask. Mr. Tittl, you have 90 seconds. Go ahead and respond, sir.
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I have worked with Governor Evers on numerous different things in the legislature. And, we kind of in the state get lumped into Washington's dysfunction. Washington is highly dysfunctional. I would say, Congressman Grothman is not really dysfunctional with the Washington elites or anything like that. But the news seems to emphasize how much we don't get along, and that makes for good news, I guess. But the reality is, under Governor Walker, when Governor Walker was in there, over 90% of the bills that were passed and signed into law were bipartisan. Under Governor Evers, it is over 94% or almost 94% of the bills that we've passed are bipartisan. So we do end up working together, and I'm always interested. I've met with the governor several times. I've talked with him about some of my bills that I want to bring forth, and I can work with any governor that wants to work and help people of the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. And if you are just joining us, this is the third and final of our series of Seehafer News Radio Debates for the election cycle 2020. Election Day, 12 days away. It is a week from Tuesday. And today we are hearing directly from the two candidates themselves vying for your vote to represent constituents in the 25th Assembly District. We are hearing from Republican incumbent Representative Paul Tittl being challenged by Democrat Kerry Trask of Manitowoc. Our WOMT Shoreline text line is open, 920-682-4674. And again, to get your question, consider for air, you must use 920. And again, to reiterate, we cannot accept or take any phone calls today, so please do not call. You're listening to Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote. So please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our Seehafer News Radio Debates presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. I'm moderator Brian Norton. Glad to have you along on the program. We'll take you right up till 2 o'clock, as today we hear from the two candidates that are vying for your vote to represent you in the 25th Assembly District, Republican incumbent Representative Paul Tittl and his Democratic challenger, Kerry Trask of Manitowoc. Here's a question from the WOMT Shoreline text line, and we'll begin with Mr. Tittl this time around. Sir, you have 90 seconds. Question is, how would each of you reform the state's unemployment office? Mr. Tittl?
All right. Well, thank you very much for that question. This unemployment, we have helped dozens of people navigate this system that is old. It's archaic. And I thought, well, okay, is it Caleb Crossman? Is it the system? And I'm not sure I figured out which one it is yet, but I will tell you that I did a little investigation. And if you complain about the system that's 40 years old and archaic, then I got to ask myself, okay, Governor Evers, in the 2019 to 2021 budget, you did not put any updates in or any money in to update that system. And already for the 2021 and 2023 system, all of the departments have filed their requests already, and there still is not a update into that system. So is it the system or was it Caleb Crossman? I don't know. It was an overwhelming of their system because of COVID-19. That's no doubt. But I think that we need to make the investment and get that system up so that people are not dealing with the type of garbage that they had to deal with during this COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. Mr. Trask, you have 90 seconds to respond, sir. Go ahead, please.
I'd agree with Paul that it was garbage, but it wasn't Caleb Crossman that did it. I mean, Crossman is a really competent person, but fixing this is one of the major reforms that's needed to help the people who are being most affected by the pandemic. The deal is that there's so many bureaucratic roadblocks created by the Republicans who have had a thing about unemployment ever since Walker was elected, and it's been the kind of the oversight or the refusal to replace a 40-year-old phone system and update obsolete software and computers, which are really the root of the problem, along with this just tsunami of unemployed people, hitting the system all at the same time. And I don't recall the Speaker of the Assembly saying, well, we need to call an emergency session here to really deal with this. You can take shots at Caleb and you can take shots at Evers, and that seems to be kind of the sort of the attitude. But, if I were elected, honestly, I would get together with Democrats and Republicans
15.
And anybody who was interested and get a bill up to take care of reforming and updating and modernizing a system which, is pretty vital to people who are, through no fault of their own, are out of work and need something to live on.
Okay, sir, we've come to the 90 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Trask.
Thank you.
You bet. We have another question here on the WOMT Shoreline text line. We begin with Mr. Trask. Please share your opinion on abortion.
Well, I'll tell you, we don't have the time in 90 seconds to do that because I think abortion is not a simple issue. It's not a simple issue, and I think the right to life people, even though their values are very sincere, just have this absolute position in an area where there's all kinds of ambiguity and grayness. I mean, concerning the health of the fetus, the health of the mother, the circumstances of rape and incest, etc. I mean, I just think that it's a very complicated issue and certainly a very emotional one. But the fact is that I'm running for the Assembly, the state Assembly, and unless Roe v. Wade is over in a modern society.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Mr. Tittl, you have 90 seconds, please.
Well, I too have a personal and a public issue on our stance on this, and that is I'm pro-life. I've been pro-life since my mom decided she was pro-life. And it's a baby. It's a life. It's a human being. And I think we have to do whatever we can to protect it. There's a lot of advancements that have come out since Roe versus Wade. We now know that babies feel pain in the womb. We now know when their heart starts beating, when their organs are functioning, and all this stuff. And I will tell you that, and I've already had this conversation with somebody they brought it up in a different way. They said, well, let's talk about women's health care. And I go, well, okay, what you mean is abortion. And I told this person, I said, I've been pro-life since as long as I can remember, and I will be, and I'm not going to change your mind. I probably am not going to change Kerry Trask's mind. But I will tell you, and if somebody doesn't vote for me because I am pro-life, I'm okay with that. I am pro-life and been endorsed by both Pro-Life Wisconsin and Wisconsin Right to Life in all of my elections. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. You are listening to our third and final series of our 2020 Seehafer News radio debates for this election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. I'm moderator Brian Norton as we are taking your questions on the WOMT Shoreline text line at 920-682-4674. We cannot accept any phone calls, so please do not call us. As we are listening today for the candidates that are vying for your vote to represent constituents in the 25th Assembly District, incumbent Republican Representative Paul Tittl and his challenger today, Democrat Kerry Trask, both are from Manitowoc. We begin with Mr. Tittl on this question from the WOMT Shoreline text line. How do you propose to pay for road funding? Mr. Tittl, you have 90 seconds.
Well, the proposing on the road funding, a few years ago, I had sought out for joint finance, I sought out an amendment to the joint finance for electric cars. And I even talked to a friend of mine that has an electric car here in town. And I asked him, I said, would you be willing to pay a little bit more because they don't pay our primary source of funding is through gas tax. And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely, because he's not buying any gas, so he never has to pay anything for the roads other than his registration. So I think we really missed the boat on this last time. And I talked with my leadership, and I was outvoted on this. But I would tell you that there should have been a small amount of maybe gas tax increase on this last one because we are missing the boat. There's a $5 billion tourist industry in the state of Wisconsin. And I'm going to tell you something. When people are visiting Wisconsin, they're driving up from Illinois, coming over from Minnesota, they're not going home with an empty tank to make sure that they pay their gas in their home state. They have to buy gas here, and we're missing out on, and it was estimated literally probably it's tens of millions of dollars that we could possibly gain from that. So I think we need to have a sustainable, as gas becomes more, or cars become more efficient,
15.
We need to figure out a more sustainable answer to our road funding. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Go ahead, please.
The road stuff has been an issue now for a number of years. I mean, the roads have gotten really awful in Wisconsin, and it not only is hard on our cars and hard on our bodies, I think, but it's really hard on our economy. And I do think that the gas tax should continue to be the primary source, but I do think that because we need to deal with the climate change issue, that there should be some kind of carbon tax as well, that can be plowed back in so that, in the meantime, whether you have an electric car or a diesel truck or whatever, we can get on with maintaining our economy. And the tourist industry is like the second biggest industry in the state, second or third. And we want to have roads that people feel comfortable traveling on. So I think it's a difficult problem. I know that Robin Voss and Fitzgerald couldn't make a decision on it, but we need to
15.
Get more than one source, I think.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trask, and back to our WOMT Shoreline text line, gentlemen. And this one is specifically for Mr. Trask, so we're going to begin with you and, of course, give Mr. Tittl a response. Mr. Trask, this particular person wants to know, do you support school choice? You have 90 seconds.
I don't support school choice, as a matter of fact, and that's going to drive some votes away from people that have their kids in parochial schools. But I don't know. People have to make choices. I think if they, we have a public school system that Tommy Thompson said that the state would support it at two thirds the cost, and we've never been there. And now, the public schools, which are vital to the democracy, vital to the vitality of communities, the public school system is being kind of drained away because the private schools lobbied harder and are now, at least to some degree, cut in on public taxes. I'm not for school choice. I'm not for the voucher system. I'm for a highly excellent, vibrant, functioning, well-supported public school system.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Mr. Tittl?
Well, thank you for that question. On school choice, I have supported school choice in the past, and I will continue because I will tell you, now in our area, we have a very unique combination of some very good private schools, parochial schools, religious schools. We also have very good education within our public schools. We are mandated by the state of Wisconsin to provide a public education system. So that's not going to go away. But I still think in some areas there is no better choice or no better person to make that decision where their kids should go to school than the parent, because they know their kids intimately better than we do. And I think in giving the parents the choice on where they can go to, where their kids can go to school, where they would best be educated, I think is just a wise choice in letting the parents make that decision rather than letting the government always make it mandatory for that decision. So, yes, I do support school choice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tittl. And a reminder that you were listening to the Seehafer News Radio Debates that are presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. And again, if you have a question that you would like either one of these two gentlemen to respond to, our WOMT Shoreline text line is open for you at 920-682-4674. And again, we cannot accept phone calls during the debate, so we ask you to please do not call the studio. You are listening to Seehafer News Radio Debates presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our third and final in our series of Seehafer News Radio Debates, Election Cycle 2020. Presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. I am moderator Brian Norton. Glad to have you along today as we are joined by the two candidates vying for your vote to represent you for the next 2 years in Madison in Wisconsin's 25th Assembly District. Republican Representative and incumbent Paul Tittl and challenger Democrat Kerry Trask both are from Manitowoc. And just a reminder, too, ladies and gentlemen, that very soon, every one of our debates during our Seehafer News Radio Debate Series will be posted on our Facebook pages. They'll be up there very soon. So if you want to just listen to it again or whenever at your disposal or leisure, just go to our WOMT Facebook page. Very soon, we'll have all three of the debates up for you to listen to. Well, back to our WOMT Shoreline text line for our next question. And Mr. Tittl, we're going to begin with you on this. What is your opinion on campaign financing in the legislature? Sir, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I will tell you that most of my campaign money comes from people around in the Manitowoc area. We have some very generous donors. I don't have any, dark money ads that are going against Mr. Trask, nor would I support that because I don't like that. I think that transparency. We've changed some of the campaign finance rules, and I think there's a few things that still could be changed in that as well. But I will tell you that I don't like the dark money ads, and I would never support them against anybody, whether it would be Kerry Trask or anybody else that would be running against me or against me. I don't like that either. So I think Kerry Trask and myself have put together, a good campaign. We're talking about the issues. We're talking about why we would be best serving the people of the 25th Assembly. And I think at that point, I think that's a good campaign. We don't even need to get together and sign a clean campaign pledge because we just won't do it. I mean, I don't see Mr. Trask doing it, and I know I'm not going to do it. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trask.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Paul on this, and Paul is not doing it because he's an ethical person. And I'm not doing it simply because it just never crossed my mind to, mess with that level of politics. The dark money is totally dark, and it really has had a tremendous impact upon Wisconsin politics in certainly the last 10 years. I mean, it's basically made the elections for Supreme Court some of the most competitive and expensive elections that we ever have. But I think that maybe Paul and I have a model that should be followed. I mean, all the money that I have, all the funds that I have, come from just from people that are supporting me, and they're local citizens, and the checks range from $5 to maybe a couple hundred in some cases. But the fact is that, geez, democracy. I mean, Republicans believe that the best government is the closest government, and in many ways, I believe that the local politics is the most democratic, and I think this pouring in of huge amounts of money for pretty sinister purposes, I think, to buy influence and all that sort of stuff, has no place in Wisconsin, which in fact has been
15.
In the old days the laboratory of democracy. And I praise Paul for his approach, and I'm perfectly happy and feel good about my approach, and let democracy reign.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trask. And back to our WOMT Shoreline text line. And Mr. Trask, this one is specifically for you, and then we'll give Mr. Tittl a chance to respond. I heard you speak at the Manitowoc protest for the shooting of Jacob Blake, after which they went down to Kenosha to join the protest. Are you for defunding of police as well? You have 90 seconds.
Never in a million years. I mean, I'm not for defunding of police at all. I'm pretty pleased with the quality of policing we have in this area. It's not an issue here, and it certainly wouldn't be something that I would support in the Assembly. I'd like some reforms that would kind of strain out the bad apples, as they say, that are just maybe a little trigger happy and a little bit too macho for dealing with volatile situations, and I think that maybe some improvements in training. But I do think that what I'd like to see is I'd like to see police unions be in favor of reforms that would legitimize their authority much more. That would say, boy, they're trying to do their best, and they're trying to be citizens rather than simply an interest group. So I do think that we should be in on this together, and I think that in some places there's some distance to go, and in other places like here, there's very little change that's needed.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Mr. Tittl.
Well, thank you. That's a good question. I recently did a ride along with the Sheriff's Department, and we have some of, I think, the finest police and Sheriff's Department and first responders in our area. I believe that probably in the state of Wisconsin. And I will tell you that, I anticipated, somebody talking about defunding the police. So I called a friend of mine that used to be a police officer here, and he does a lot of training, trains a lot of the cops in northeast Wisconsin. And as I was talking with him, we were talking about, I said, do you do, how do you train chokeholds? And he goes, Paul, he says, we don't train chokeholds. We don't do any of that stuff. And he goes, everything that we actually train has been issued by the Department of Justice in the state of Wisconsin, and that we follow their standards, and that's the only standards we follow. So if we need to change it, we need to meet with Attorney General Josh Call and ask him what do you need to change. And I will tell you, the last thing I will tell you is that no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And I will tell you that.
Okay, Mr. Tittl, we thank you, and we are winding down, believe it or not, the remaining minutes that we have on our third and final Seehafer News Radio Debate for the 2020 election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center Manitowoc. We are hearing today from the candidates of the 25th Assembly District that are vying to represent you for the next 2 years in Madison, Republican incumbent Representative Paul Tittl and challenger Democrat Kerry Trask of Manitowoc. This is the Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our third and final of our 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center Manitowoc. I'm moderator Brian Norton. Glad to have you participate on the program today. And our WOMT Shoreline text line still open, 920-682-4674. And again, we do want to remind you that if you missed any of our previous debates, or if you're just tuning into this one and wondering, well, what did they all talk about? Our WOMT Facebook page will have all three of our debates up on the site shortly. So if you want to go ahead and re-rack, re-listen, or whatever you want to do, you'll have free reign to be able to do them on our Facebook page very soon, where they will all be posted. Well, Mr. Tittl, we're going to begin with you on this one from our WOMT Shoreline text line. The Unfair Sales Act is a very important law on the books to help independent owners of gas stations have an even playing field against corporate companies. If the Unfair Sales Act was going to be appealed, would you defend the law to stay on the books for your constituents in your area? Mr. Tittl?
I assume that they're talking about the minimum markup law. Is that?
I would think so.
That's correct?
I would believe so, yes.
Okay. And the minimum markup law, I think, is a bit of an archaic system out in there right now, and should be looked at as far as whether you do it, because I think people are paying a lot more for a lot of things. There's a bit of an archaic system out in there right now, and should be looked at as far as whether you do it, because I think people are paying a lot more for a lot of things for example, gasoline or what have you. And it's a very complicated law. So I think that should be looked at. We've talked about it. Various different people in the Assembly and in the Senate have talked about it. And I would be open to looking at it. And then I also understand that it also levels the playing field for some of the smaller people, too. So, with that, there's pros and cons for both, believe it or not. And I guess that would be one of them that would have to be delved into a lot further in order to better understand and find out where we're going to come out on that.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. Mr. Trask?
Well, we disagree on this one. I don't know the intricacies of the law at all, but I've heard it talked about for a long time. And the fact of the matter is we have a choice here. We have a choice of the big guys, like, getting it all, and the little guys just, going begging, or we can in fact take some kind of action. I mean, we do it, Trump tries to do it with tariffs and et cetera, and that doesn't necessarily maybe is a good analogy. But the fact is that, wow, don't we want an economy and a society where ordinary people, people that aren't giant corporations can actually compete in the marketplace? Don't we want to support a kind of a diversity of choices within the market system? I'm not, like I say, familiar with the intricacies of the law, but anything that levels the playing field, there's a very famous study that says, every problem that society has
15.
can be addressed effectively with more equality. So I'm in favor of the minimum markup stuff. So.
Okay, sir, we've hit the 90 seconds. Thank you for your response. And back to our WOMT Shoreline text line, and Mr. Trask, we'll begin with you on this one. Mr. Trask, if you are elected, what are your plans to replace Calumet Avenue and Washington Street, since it is a state highway? We cannot wait 17 years. Go ahead, sir.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, we have our headquarters down on Washington Street, and it's one of the bumpiest streets in the state. What am I going to do? I mean, we have to get this in perspective. I mean, I'm running for the state assembly. I'm not running for governor. The kind of influence. I mean, certainly I would plead the case, and I would pester the Department of Transportation, and I would be part of a team that exerts pressure and good arguments. But the fact of the matter is that this is not a Lone Ranger kind of solution. But the fact of the matter is, it seems pretty unreasonable that 17 years, because it's technically a state highway, that it can't be repaired. I mean, the argument is, of course, the longer you leave it, the higher the bill. And so I do think a persuasive argument could be made, and perhaps even could be won. But it's one. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Paul has some kind of magic solution to this, but one representative in the assembly is not going to solve that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Trask. Mr. Tittl?
All right. Well, yes, that highway, every time I was on Be My Guest, somebody would call about it. So, and then I talk with Justin. I get together with Justin, several times a year to talk and just, hey, what's going on in the city? How can I help as your assemblyman? And one of the times I wrote to the Secretary of the Department of Transportation. To my amazement, he actually came to Manitowoc. We had coffee. We went coffee on Calumet Avenue. Then I actually got Justin Nichols, Senator Lemieux, the Secretary Craig Thompson, designee of the Secretary of Transportation, and Colleen from the Northeast region. I got them in my on my wife's car, and it's not a big car, and I put them all in there, and we packed it, and I drove, and I found every pothole possible. And I drove them on it, and I think that's one of the things that you can do is you have to show it to them. You have to show it to them, and we actually showed it firsthand. Now, at that time, Secretary Thompson gave Justin a couple different ideas on how he could apply for this special funding. We put about $75 million more in road funding in this past budget so that he could apply for that. And I guess, Justin has got a plan, and he's going to try to work on
15.
it. I agree, 17 years is too long, and I think we need to work on it. And Senator Lemieux and I have been working hard trying to put the pressure on to no avail yet. But we will keep continuing.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. And a reminder, you're listening to our third and final of our Seehafer News Radio Debates. This is Election Cycle 2020, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. Back to wrap up our remaining moments with the two candidates vying for your vote in the 25th Assembly District, Republican incumbent Representative Paul Tittl and challenger Democrat Kerry Trask, both of Manitowoc. You're listening to the Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our Seehafer News Radio Debates. I am moderator Brian Norton, as we are presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc, and we are joined today by the two candidates vying for your vote to represent you in Madison for the next 2 years on Election Day. Republican incumbent Representative Paul Tittl and challenger Democrat Kerry Trask, both of Manitowoc. And Mr. Tittl, we'll begin with you on this one from our WOMT Shoreline text line. What are your views on gun control?
Well, I will tell you, gun control is two hands holding steady. A little bit of humor into that, but no, actually, I believe that our founding fathers believed in the Second Amendment. I believe in the Second Amendment. I am a concealed carry permit holder. I hunt and I fish. I've raised in a hunting and fishing household, and I believe that it is one of our rights that we have in the Second Amendment to protect our homes and protect our families and protect our businesses. And I believe that it is, we have to actually hold people more accountable. There's a lot of people that are committing crimes with guns that are not being held accountable in some of our bigger cities. And I think that's a shame because crimes with guns should be held accountable. These are not nonviolent crimes. If they're using a gun, it is violent, okay? If they're using, some type of a weapon, that's not a nonviolent crime. We could talk about criminal justice reform in a whole different aspect, but criminal justice reform and committing a crime with a gun is a whole different story. So I believe that we need to protect the Second Amendment for all.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. Mr. Trask.
Yeah, it's not a black and white issue, I don't think. The Second Amendment's in the Constitution, and it's been interpreted, agree with the interpretation or not, that, it pretty much gives everybody a right to own and use a firearm. But like all the rights in the Bill of Rights, like the right to free speech, it's not an absolute right. It's just not an absolute right. And I think the fact is that the highest priority for people in this society is that they have safe lives. And, there's not a day goes by that somebody isn't shooting somebody for whatever reason, partly because irresponsible people have guns. They feel like they have a kind of an absolute right to own them and use them and et cetera. But I'm for beefed up background checks. I'm not going to try to take on the Second Amendment, but I'm for beefed up background checks, and I'm for if you commit a crime with a gun and you ever have a gun again,
15.
It's a much more serious offense. So I think we have to keep guns out of mentally ill people, people who are habitual criminals, etc. So.
Okay, sir, thank you. We've hit the 90-second time limit. Thank you for your response. Let's get one more question in here, and we're going to begin with Mr. Trask on this one. What would the economic impact be if we went in Wisconsin to a $15 minimum wage, or a federal $15 minimum wage? Mr. Trask.
Boy, I'd love to do that. I mean, I'd like to have people in Wisconsin who work at the bottom end of the economy make a living wage. I think right now it's not a thing to be seriously contemplated until we begin to have some real economic recovery. I know that small businesses, and I'm a supporter of small business. Small business would pay heavily for that, but at the same time, maybe with a national $15 minimum wage, all boats would rise to the same level, but I think that people have to have an opportunity to make a living wage.
Okay, Mr. Trask, thank you, and Mr. Tittl, if you'd like to respond.
Sure. I think the minimum wage was never designed as the family supporting job. It was designed as a person that's entry level, unskilled workers trying to come in and gaining skills, in order to prove themselves, their worth, their work ethic to their employers, and then they actually get higher paying jobs. Because it's an old saying is that if you have a good worker, you better pay him a good wage, or somebody else will. And it is so true. And right now, as you look around, I see billboards all over the state and in even our area. They're way above that $15 an hour wage, starting wage, and then some of them even have sign-on bonuses. There's and you guys are advertising on the radio station all the time for different people looking for different employer or employees, and all of them are just about starting above $15. I think the market is what designs it, and the market is what pushes it that way. I don't think you can just set a minimum wage at that high of a level and not expect something for it. And as an employer, you have to actually expect some work out of that person. You can't just pay everybody the same based upon
15.
Their work ethic. I think that the better workers can get paid more. They'll have greater chance for advancement, and their employer will recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. And boy, gentlemen, time goes quickly. We have come to almost the end of today's debate. Time to give your closing statements. And Mr. Trask, as we had discussed before we went on air, you decided to go first for your opening statement, so you will give your closing statement first, sir. You have 90 seconds.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's been a good debate, and I appreciate having the opportunity to speak. But I want to remind people that it's been now 180 days since Robin Voss's Republican State Assembly has done any work whatsoever for the people of Wisconsin, who are currently, as we all know, caught in the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. Whenever called into session, and they've been called into session a number of times, the Assembly is gavelled in and gavelled out without taking up any business. And consequently, our full-time assembly has become the most inactive, non-performing governing body in the entire country. And it's time for a change in both attitudes about government and a change in priorities. It's time we were safe from the pandemic, and that a statewide plan based on good science be implemented to reduce the ferocity of its spread. It's also time for all the people of the state to have access to affordable health care and for our working families to be paid a living wage. We are Wisconsin, after all, and we were once a state with a proud reputation for clean government.
15.
And we were known throughout the world as the laboratory of democracy. And it's high time that, again, we had fair election maps and an end of systematic voter suppression.
Okay, sir, we do thank you. We've hit the 90-second limit. Mr. Tittl?
That was fast.
Yes, it was. Mr. Tittl, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Seehafer Broadcasting, WOMT, WCUB, and all the people listening, and Novak Service Center for sponsoring this. And I also thank you, Mr. Trask, for joining me. I would also like to thank the people of the 25th Assembly District for their support that they've graciously shown me for the past 8 years. I have worked with both Democrats and Republicans to make Wisconsin a better place to live, work, and do business. We now live in uncharted times. Do I have all the answers? No, but I do know people who will help, and that's my strength. Many people have struggled the past year, and we have helped them with numerous requests, like licensing issues, unemployment, government red tape, and others. We've invested record amounts in our public education system, over $650 billion increase last time. So with that, I humbly ask for your continued support, and I promise to work hard for all of the people of the 25th, whether you voted for me or not. With that, I ask you to go and cast your vote today, or I ask for your vote on November 3rd. And I'm Paul Tittl, and I appreciate it, and I approve this message.
Thank you, Mr. Tittl. And gentlemen, we want to thank both of you for taking time out of your schedule to voice your concerns and on all the issues that we have brought up here today on the debate. Thank you. Best of luck to you on Election Day, November 3rd. And again, we thank you very much for taking your time to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that will put an end to our series of WOMT Seehafer News 2020 debates this election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope that all of these debates were helpful to you. Again, they'll be posted very soon on our WOMT Facebook page. Important that you exercise your right to vote. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, and with these series of debates, we hope that this has informed you, enlightened you, and motivated you to do just that. Get out and vote. With that, we say good afternoon. Go vote November 3rd.
Thank you for listening to the 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. Learn more about the candidates and the issue that matters most to you by visiting seehafernews.com.